Hi, I'm Andrew Shaw and I teach bass here at the Jazz Music Institute. Today, we're going to talk a bit more about walking bass lines, picking up roughly from where I left off in the earlier video about bass lines. So I'm going to use the piece Autumn Leaves and we'll concentrate on the A sections. That's what I was playing just then, was the A sections of Autumn Leaves. Now, we were talking earlier about bass line construction and using the arpeggios that go with the chords. Every chord symbol, every chord has an arpeggio. If you break up the chord, instead of playing the notes together, you play them separately, you have the arpeggio. So we've talked about that, and we've also talked about using the scales that go with the chords. So in Autumn Leaves, I just played it in G minor. So the first chord is a C minor 7, 4-note chord, C, E flat, G and B flat. There's your arpeggio. Now the scale that will go with that in this tune is the Dorian mode. So each of the chord symbols that follows has a scale that goes with it. So it's fairly important to know those scales. In the case of some chords, there'll be more than one scale that will apply, or could apply, depending on the context, what's going on around you. So what I really want to talk about today is introducing some chromatic passing notes to link those chords together. Because what we want to do with our bass line is not only outline the harmony for the benefit of whoever is playing or singing the melody or improvising a solo, we also want to create a feeling of moving forward. So our bass line needs to reflect that. We need to create this momentum, forward momentum. So if we have a look at the A section of Autumn Leaves, we've got the C minor 7, followed by F7, a B flat major 7, to E flat major 7 sharp 11, I'll leave out the sharp 11, to A minor 7 flat 5, to a D7, and G minor 7, to G7, which brings us back to the C minor at the top of the form. So those arpeggios are fine, but if you just played that as a bass line, it wouldn't feel like it had a whole lot of movement, although everything would be correct, and you would be outlining the harmony very clearly. It would sound like this. Not particularly interesting as bass lines go. So the next thing we need to consider is all of the inversions of each of those arpeggios. So you really need to practice this slowly and patiently and persistently. It will take a while, but you need to know what all the inversions are. Those 4 notes there, we have 4 notes, therefore we have 24 possibilities for how those notes could be ordered. That's all great. We can use those inversions to link from one chord to the next. So we could have again, they were just the arpeggio tones. We're not worrying about any scales at this point. That was a little better, it had a bit more direction, but we can add chromatic passing notes to link those chords together, and that will give us a bit more spice. So if we look at the triad from the C minor, C, E flat and G, if we add a G flat, that drops us down to the root of the F7. So there's a chromatic passing note. And there was another one. So we applied the same kind of thing to the F7, playing the triad, but dropping down to the 3rd, up to the 5th, flat in the 5th, chromatic passing note, to get to the root of the B flat major. So when we add those chromatic passing notes, it gives us a bit more direction. Now they might be outside the chord or outside the scale that applies, but if we're doing it on beat 4, it's the weakest beat of the bar, and the chromatic passing note has happened, and we're on the strong chord tone on beat 1. So everything resolves. And remember, your guitarist or piano player, whoever's playing the harmony, will probably be anticipating into beat 1 when they're comping the chords. So we'll get that nice flow through the bass line. So another tool we can use to incorporate this, instead of playing the arpeggio, we can play 1, 2, and 3, and then put a chromatic note in. So there's another option for you. We can get even trickier. We do not have to play the root on beat 1 of every bar. Once the harmony is established, if we've played the form once through, for example, the harmony is established, the tonality of the piece is established. So we can then start mixing up our bass lines, which means we could play, there's the arpeggio of the C minor 7, and come down to the 3rd of the F7 chord. Yeah? So we're just dropping in chromatic notes either side of our target note. So we've got a target note on beat 1, it'll be a strong chord tone, often a 1, sometimes the 3rd or the 7th or the 5th. Maybe it'll be another note from the scale, depending on the line that's going on around you. So we can add more in. That time I added the chromatic notes as skips rather than crotchets or quarter notes. The chromatic notes could go earlier in the bar as well. For example, so anywhere you have a space between chords and chord tones, there will probably be a chromatic note that you can fit in between them to create a more moving bass line. It adds interest and creates momentum. Now, use your ears. Don't worry about the theory behind what degree the chromatic note is. It could be a sharp 11 or a flat 13, but that doesn't matter at this stage. What matters is whether you think it sounds good and whether it feels good. The most important thing to remember is that the bass's job is to make everyone else sound good. So use your ears. If you think it sounds good, it probably does. If you think it sounds a bit dodgy, well, maybe it is. And revisit that note and decide whether it sounds good or not. Does it add to the momentum? Are you still outlining the harmony? We don't want to be ambiguous with our bass line because that can create doubt in the soloist. We need to support the soloist at all times and feed them information. That way we can create music together and have the conversation that jazz is all about. And that's just about it for today, I think.